Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History and our dive into the tabloid papers of September 1977, the month after Elvis passed away. We've already learned many surprising things. Today, we're going to hear from a girlfriend of Elvis's that you've never heard of. We're going to hear from Priscilla. We're going to hear from Red West. And we might even hear from Priscilla's attorney. But all that's going to come up right after we enter the arena of the tabloid magazines the same way that Elvis would enter a dojo, through the crucible of a warrior. Hi, Cali girl. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here.
Born in the fire, Evansville flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, on baptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot-o elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every KO name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no more play tame. Saw came in, fist like a storming set. Put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the map when he rose with the raw. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame, but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the map when he rolls with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. And the dojo of legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're in the arena of the tabloid magazines once again, here in September 1977. And we started off with this one, which is probably from a slightly later period in 1977, and it might have been on the shelves all the way till December 1978. The Only Woman Elvis Ever Loved, Priscilla and Her Story, a magazine devoted to changing the narrative, because right now the narrative is under attack. The tabloids want to create their own love story for Priscilla and Elvis. They want to create all kinds of controversy. And why do they want to do this? So they can sell more tabloid magazines. It's all about the money. And these little players like Priscilla and Red West and Sonny West and Dave Hebler and Ricky Stanley and these others that are receiving these little bitty payments, these payments are being turned into millions and millions and millions of dollars, more money than Elvis ever made. And it's all going into the pockets of these tabloid magazine owners who are trashing Elvis. One of them being Rupert Murdoch, who happens to own the Star. And he published, well, he didn't publish, he paid to have the book written, Elvis What Happened. And then he sold it and it was published, and he made money from that. And he made money from being able to cut that book up and put it into this magazine. This is the Star, Elvis What Happened. We went through this one yesterday, but or maybe in the previous episode. So if you missed those, be sure to go back into the archive and check out what was said in these articles. We hit the highlights so that we know how the myth is being generated in real time of 1977. These aren't things that were made up years later. Elvis wasn't even cold when people started to make up these stories and put them into print. And that's how they got cemented into the minds of the public. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And we are in this one. It's a same magazine, just a week later. This magazine prints every week. You got to sell a lot of copies when you print every week to make your money. And they're, not putting a lot of money into the printing. Now, think about how smart from a business angle this is. You pay Red and Sonny and Dave virtually nothing. They thought it was a massive amount of money, but compared to what you stand to make in the moment before Elvis has passed away, it was nothing. Because Rupert thought he would at least quadruple his money. So it wasn't much of an investment for him. He invests this money. And then he gets to make quadruple his money back when he sells it for publication rights. But he gets to keep the rights to publish it himself in this magazine. So in this magazine, it takes up 2 or 3 or 4 pages of every issue. That's 2 or 3 or 4 pages you don't have to pay anybody to write. It's already written. All you got to do is typeset it and put it in the magazine. The whole cost of the magazine is mostly in paying the people to write the text that goes onto these pages. I mean, the printing and the setting and all that, it costs something, but it's not as much as what it is just to pay these guys to write. So you're saving an enormous amount of money. And you already made all your money back on the book when you sold its rights for publication. And now you're just making money every single week as this thing keeps publishing. And so you repeat this formula with a few more people that know Elvis. We saw this picture yesterday, which, for all the faults of the magazine, this is an amazing Elvis picture. And then we saw this one. And we heard from Ricky Stanley. And Ricky told us about the time that he got picked up for trying to pick up a prescription at a pharmacy with a forged prescription. So it wasn't just that he was getting drugs off the street or doing illegal drugs. He went and tried to get something with a forgery. That like upscales the crime a little bit. But Elvis was there as a big brother. He saved Ricky. And Ricky told us that he was the last one to see Elvis. That he gave him, well, not the last one to see him, but the last one to give him a massage. He gave him a massage right before Elvis went to play racquetball. with Billy and Joe Smith and Ginger Alden. He says that he gave Elvis a massage. Elvis and Ginger got dressed in sweatsuits. They went downstairs. They met Joe and uh, Billy Smith, and they all went over to the racquetball court and played racquetball. And Ricky says that's the last time that he saw Elvis. Well, he didn't actually say that. I think he implies that's the last time he saw Elvis. But we've got this girl that's behind Ricky. And that was the big secret for today. And it's from an article that says, it's titled, Elvis's Secret Girlfriend. Says, I loved him for 5 years. And Deborah says that Ricky was good looking in person. She can't say much about it. Yeah, I think Elvis had nicknamed him the Raven from Whitehaven because he always wore his hair long like this. And when he's 23 years old here. But I think from the time he was in high school to about here, he was a little more careful with his hair, and he would brush it back in these huge wings that were really popular in the 70s. Always kept it long and brushed it back in these wings, which I, as a kid of the early 80s, really thought was cool. There was a lot of people that did that. But then Elvis called him the Raven, Whitehaven, which is the area where Elvis and Vernon lived. That whole area was called Whitehaven. Deborah said he sure did. He wore that hair long. And Deborah, you've actually seen Ricky in real life when he was that age. You were living also in Whitehaven, if I remember correctly. And so you would have got to see Ricky. And I've always heard that he was really handsome at that time. Now this girl, this is a 21-year-old Elvis fan and accounting major. And she's saying that she knew Elvis personally, was his girlfriend. Her name is Debbie Watts. Debbie Watts. And Deborah says that yes, Raven was Ricky's nickname. That's cool that you're able to tell us that for sure. That's neat. And Debbie Watts, she says, I was always there in the background when he needed me. Referring to Elvis, of course. And the article says that Debbie started dating Elvis when she was a 16-year-old Memphis schoolgirl. Their love affair began when Debbie, who knew Elvis's father and stepmother, Vernon and Dee, was introduced to Presley at the Graceland Mansion. Now, if I had just read this in a tabloid magazine, which this is, The Star is certainly a tabloid magazine, but we are going to find that it contains truth. It likes to sensationalize the truth. That this girl is 21, and if she knew Elvis for 5 years, she was 16. Normally, I would have said she knew Vernon and Dee. How would I know that? She's in this picture here with Ricky, and Ricky's holding her hand, and it appears that Ricky knows her. Now, obviously, this is a staged picture for the newspaper, but Ricky's being in the picture, is giving veracity to what Debbie is saying, that she knows Ricky's parents, Vernon and Dee Presley. At least that's how I'm taking it, and I believe that's why they put the picture here in this newspaper. And Cali Girl says that Elvis dated a Memphis bank teller in June to August 77, Deborah Gail Watts. That is this girl. However, as we're going to learn in this article, she's not a bank teller. But we're going to get there. But I also found that same information, Callie. So that is out there that she was a bank teller, and it was from a pretty reputable source. And Pat says, so was Elvis seeing her while he was seeing Ginger? That's a good question, Pat. And Callie saying that yes, he was. Well, let's see what Debbie says. Debbie Watts says, we went steady for 6 months. I was a well-kept secret. So let's stop here before we get all the way through her statement. Her first sentence is, we went steady for 6 months. Well, let's take a quick look back at the title of the article, which was Elvis's secret girlfriend says I loved him for 5 years. Okay, we have a disconnect here. There's a 5-year loving, but only a 6-month relationship where they went steady. What does that mean, that we went steady? I mean, Elvis is a 40, well, even 5 years before, he was a man in his late 30s. Did he go steady with people? Is that the way Elvis would have said, oh, I'm going steady with this person? Callie says that Elvis dated Anita, Priscilla, and Bonnie at the same time. That's true. And Pat says, if this is true, then was Elvis seriously thinking about marrying Ginger? We're going to actually get a lot of information about that, Pat. Not out of this particular article, but we are going to get it from this magazine. And Callie Girl says that Joe Esposito said Elvis was dating other women when he was with Ginger. Joe was there. He was around a lot, so we've got to take that seriously. And David saying that this is a short fling in 75. And so if it's in 75, then it's not really pertinent to 77 and Elvis's passing away. But the newspaper has framed it as I loved him for 5 years, which kind of pushes it into immediacy, as if this was happening in those moments. So, Pat, it doesn't look like maybe he was dating this girl during that period. Of course, we haven't got through the rest of the article yet. And Pat says, why give Ginger a wedding ring then? And that's kind of what we're here to figure out, that it's all very confusing, isn't it? Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And so we've got this girl. She knows Vernon and Dee. We're assuming this is true because she's in this picture with Ricky. Ricky seems to be approving that he knows her. Or maybe he just liked to hold the hand of a pretty girl in the picture. I mean, we don't know, but the magazines put this picture with the article to make us feel like there's veracity here. Back to what Debbie's saying, she said, we went steady for 6 months. It was a well-kept secret because I was still at school. Okay, so Debbie's 21 here. If she was still in school, this would have been the year that she graduated, or possibly before, but she's in college at this moment because she is an accounting major, according to the newspaper article. So she's not a bank teller. She will eventually be a bank teller, I believe, but she isn't at the time of this article. She is an accounting major. Callie says that Elvis gave all of his girlfriend rings. Well, he did give them all rings. And so then the question becomes, is it an engagement ring that Elvis gave her? This magazine has already, well, in that special about Priscilla, basically said it wasn't an engagement ring. That, as Callie's saying, it's just one of the rings that he gave to his girlfriends. David saying that this love affair between, if that's what it is, or a fling, it's detailed in the book We Love Him Tender. which I think is the D. Stanley book. But we're not looking at that particular salacious book yet. We're looking at what led up to it, because that one hasn't been published yet. This is only a month after Elvis has passed away. And Cali Girl says, why didn't Elvis marry Ginger right away? And why was he waiting for months? He was probably thinking about it. That's a good point, Callie. He was a man who could have made things happen immediately. And yet, I think we know that it was an engagement ring. So again, there's a tension there that we're not able to easily determine what the right note on that guitar string is. And Cali Girl says if he really loved Ginger, he would not be with other women, but that's Elvis. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he could confine himself to one person in his love. I don't know if that means he didn't love him. And Cali Girl points out that he did not buy Ginger a diamond ring from the jewelry store. He took it from one of his own rings. And again, I think there's two ways to look at that. One is it was his most important diamond, and he had some emotional attachment to it. However, it is hard to say that Elvis had emotional attachment to any material item. And it's true, he didn't get it from a jewelry store, but he did try. They just didn't have it. And Pat says that Ginger says she still has the ring. She does. She's shown pictures of it. It's a very beautiful ring. If you've never seen the pictures, Pat, let me know, and I'll figure out a way that we'll see them in some future broadcast. The Cali Girl says that Vernon later told Elvis when he was going to marry Ginger later on, and Elvis said, God only knows. I do think that Elvis was vacillating wildly in the last 6 months of his life. And I think it had a lot to do with the toxins that were running through his system, as well as the drugs he was using to fight the pain and to make it him able to perform. He was also taking some drugs on top of that, like to try and help him tan, so he would appear healthy. So there's layers and layers of stress and true emotional and physical trauma happening to Elvis that I think leads him to vacillate wildly in his thoughts. And so he's spinning around this idea of marrying Ginger. But that's a whole nother episode. And Pat says that she hasn't seen that ring. Well, Pat, it's important we see it. So we'll see if because they're making a lot of statements about it here in these magazines. And Anna says she'd love to see that too. And Deborah says she thinks the diamond was out of his TBC ring. That is correct. It's been replaced with, I believe, a cubic zirconia, and that's what's on display. Sometimes at Graceland, and sometimes it travels around. But back to what Debbie's saying. She says, we went steady for 6 months. It was a well-kept secret because I was at school. And those two lines are telling us this did not happen in 1977. Debbie says, Elvis would often take me to visit his mother's grave in the same cemetery where my brother is buried, the one where Elvis now lies. I think this is a really important piece of information. Elvis would take this young lady, who must have been grieving for her own brother who's buried in the cemetery, to his mother's grave in the same cemetery. And I think they must have grieved together for their lost loved ones, that Elvis saw this in her. And that this is kind of the basis of the relationship. They have this shared grief. Now, I can't say that for sure. I mean, all we've got is what Debbie's statements are. Now, Debbie says Elvis was the most generous, wonderful, warm hearted man I've ever met. And so yesterday, somebody asked, and it's asked a lot about Priscilla, is it possible that Elvis was the love of her life? And basically, we ask it because most of us don't believe it could be true, based on other actions that Priscilla has taken. But when you hear Debbie say Elvis was the most generous, wonderful, warm hearted man I've ever met, and you think that that sentiment, we've already heard it echoed by so many others, like Anne Margaret and Nancy Sinatra, and just so many others of his co stars and other women who knew him, that how could Priscilla have not noticed this or not longed for it later? But does that mean that he was the love of her life? Not saying that. But obviously, he was something very incredible, because this is the way that many, many, many women describe him. Elvis was the most generous, wonderful, warm hearted man I've ever met. Everybody who was as close to him as I was loved the man. So Debbie puts herself into a group of people that were as close to him as she was. She feels she was especially close. And this is the way that Elvis made everybody feel who were near him. And Callie Girl says that Elvis bought this girl in Whitehaven a blue Pontiac Trans Am. Interesting. And that he bought her jewelry and clothes. And Pat says, no way Elvis was done with Priscilla. And David's saying this is Ricky's girlfriend, but it's not Ricky's girlfriend. I mean, maybe she dated Ricky, I don't know, but in this article, she dated Elvis. Which, even if she dated Ricky later or before, that really had to affect Ricky somehow, right? Like, it has to be hard to be a man around in Elvis's circle because of the effect that he does have on women. But that's not what we're talking about in this particular episode either. Debbie says often we would watch television or just sit around and talk. Now that's basically the exact same thing that other girl we heard from the day before, who was at the parties in California. She said they all sat around on the couch and they watched TV. Wasn't as much talking in those because there was probably too many girls there that were waiting to listen to Elvis. But Debbie spent some one-on-one or close to one-on-one time, it sounds, and they would watch television and talk. Debbie says Elvis was very possessive about those he loved. If you dated him, you never went out with anyone else. Now that's part of the myth that we've all heard. I don't know what the truth on that is. I think many of us would jump to say that is true. I don't know that we've actually seen any evidence of that in our journeys together through 1967 and in the spiritual books and in his karate training and some of the other little arcs that we've done. I'm not sure that we've seen that yet. Not saying it's not there. Priscilla talks about it a little bit, but we haven't really gotten into that either. And Callie Girl says that this girl was in a Miss America beauty pageant. Well, that's interesting because this article does not mention that. But she is very beautiful in this picture, so I would not doubt it. Do you know if she won? And the article says Debbie doubted that Elvis had any plans to marry the last girl he was linked with, local beauty queen Ginger Alden, who was with Elvis on his last night. So Debbie, like Priscilla, she doubts that Elvis was going to marry Ginger. Now, I don't know how much that's worth because we've already established that Elvis wasn't with Debbie during that last year. So, not sure if that has any meaning to what we're looking at. But it's the way Debbie felt. Debbie says Ginger was a newcomer and was already on her way out. Elvis was getting tired of her. Debbie stated, according to this article, that she had a secret love affair with the king for 5 years. Debbie said she spent 3 nights with Elvis at Graceland in the week before he died. Now, this part is really interesting because we've just seen Debbie say, let's go back to what Debbie said. We went steady for 6 months. And then when we come here, we get a reiteration of the title of the article. Debbie stated she had a secret love affair with the king for 5 years. However, they've been quoting Debbie, and suddenly they're not quoting Debbie. They're just saying she said this. Well, that's not what she said. We saw it for ourselves. She said 6 months. Cali Girl says that she did not win the Miss America contest. I think David's trying to say that she wasn't Ricky's girlfriend. She was a fling for Ricky. That maybe she's like a girl that Ricky brought into the circle. And that's kind of how Elvis found her, I'm thinking. Or he's saying that she was never connected to Elvis in any way, and this is her fantasy. And Gunn says she thinks Priscilla thought life was better alone, making career with a new man, and sometimes she may have appreciated Elvis later on in life, but she can't imagine that she looked at him as the love of her life. And I think Gunn's saying, especially in this moment in September of 77. I kind of think I would agree with that, because if she did feel that way, I don't think she would have left, no matter how much she had to put up with. But I wasn't there. I'm not within their relationship. Cali Girl says that she also believes Elvis was getting tired of Ginger. And Gunn reminds us there were 3 divorce settlements, and who does that to someone you love? We're going to hear more about that within this magazine. And Cali points out that Elvis didn't stay with women very long, that he dumped Anita after 5 years. And Pat says that she knows Elvis and Ginger were fighting a lot because it was in Lisa's book. Callie agrees. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Happy coffee. And so David's pointing out again, this girl has nothing to do with Elvis. Well, it's very possible you're correct, that she has absolutely nothing to do with Elvis. However, she has something to do with Ricky, and therefore Vernon and Dee, and she was around Graceland. And so we are, getting her thoughts. And she's not saying what this article is saying. We've looked at her quotes. They're not saying what it is. She's saying that she felt like they were going steady for 6 months. I don't know what that means, that you're going steady. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. This girl apparently had a feeling like her and Elvis were in some kind of high school relationship together. And that might have been a valid feeling. That doesn't indicate they were doing anything together other than she came over to watch TV in the TV room with everybody else. She never even mentions times that they're alone, but let's finish out the article. because it also says something about 3 nights at Graceland. And so I believe that those 3 nights that she's indicating at Graceland are she knew Ricky, and Ricky had her over at Graceland for 3 of those nights. And she's saying she spent the night there. Well, if he worked the night shift, so if she came and spent some time with him during the night shift, then yes, that would have been overnight. It doesn't say she spent the night with Elvis overnight, just that she spent the night at, well, she says with Elvis at Graceland in the week before he died. But this is a statement, again, that the newspaper says she said, but we've just seen it lie about what she said about the 5 years. So I don't think there's any veracity in these statements. But I do like to look at her actual quotes. And Gunn saying that going steady for me is not to date anyone else at the same time. Yeah, and I don't see how this girl could have possibly thought that was true. So I don't think she could be using. Now, it might mean she's not dating anybody else because she made a reference to that. Elvis wouldn't want me to date anybody else. And Callie says that she thinks that Parker thought that if any of these girls stayed with Elvis more than 5 years, it was considered a common law marriage. So I think that that would have really become more of a concern in the 70s when Clint Eastwood started getting it. Clint Eastwood's girlfriend is like basically the one that began this common law thing in California. And that's where it's real easy to get it. And Elvis and Priscilla owned property jointly in California. That's one of the issues with this whole divorce settlement. And Luann says that she loves Elvis, but sorry to say that Elvis loves women's company by his side too much. He did love women. Now, Debbie Watt's father, he's famous in the local area of Memphis. He is Haywood Sparky Watts, and he was an announcer at boxing matches on Beale Street. And here we can see the page that this article actually comes from. And you can get these really cool icicles to hang on your Christmas tree that glow in the dark. They soak up light and then they glow in the dark. $3 for 100. But Haywood Sparky Watts, he announced boxing matches on Beale Street, and he was also a local business owner. He was a well-respected man. And Sparky, he passed away at the age of 72 in 1992. And that was Debbie Watt's father. So she was a local Memphis girl. Pat says that she thinks Elvis had a hard time trusting women because of how Priscilla treated him. I think he had a hard time trusting women because of how several women treated him, but yes, I agree that Priscilla added to that. And Callie mentions that in Germany, Elvis was dating a lot of women and girls there, and then he met Priscilla, and he was already dating his secretary, Elizabeth. Yeah, and she lived in his house, so yeah, he was dating her. And he brought her to Graceland, and then she double-crossed him. And she left with one of the guys he brought back, Rex Mansfield. That, again, is a whole other story. If you guys don't know the Rex Manfield Elizabeth Stefanik story, let me know. Maybe we'll get that onto the list. And Gunn says that Elvis loved to have someone near him. Didn't want to be alone. It would have been strange if he chose a guy. That's true. That's very true. And he did like to have someone around. He was someone that needed another person nearby. So before we get to how could this Battlestar Galactica episode possibly be tied into what we're talking about today in September of 1977, because some of you may know that Battlestar Galactica, well, it was a 1978 project. But let's finish off the story about Debbie. Oh, well, I can't finish off the story about Debbie because I forgot one of the pictures that I need. We're going to finish that off tomorrow. Don't let me forget, I've got something, a beautiful picture of Debbie to show you, but somehow I didn't get it in the lineup. So we're going to move on to this Battlestar Galactica picture from this episode called The Lost Warrior. And Pat mentions that Elvis was always being dumped on by one of these women, and that's why he had to move from woman to woman. Well, that's an interesting thought. And so we're going to look at a article out of this magazine called The Bodyguard's Tribute, which was on the thumbnail of the episode. And that's on this page, and you can see it over at the side. Now, most of the page is devoted to an excerpt from the book Elvis, What Happened? Written by Steve Dunleavy from interviews he did with Red and Sonny West, as well as Dave Hebler. But over at the left, you can see a long, skinny column. And that's a column that's not in the book. And it's done with an interview from Red, it appears to be after Elvis has passed away. And this interview is written by our friend Steve Dunleavy, author of the book Elvis, What Happened, who works for this newspaper. And what Red says is, yeah, Elvis was a crazy son of a gun, and yeah, we had lots of fights. But I love the son of a gun. There were times I hugged that guy like a little baby. Because let me tell you, when he died at 42, he was still a little baby. A spoiled, lovable kid. There were times I just felt like spanking him. Just wanted to put him over my knee and give him a good hiding for being naughty. So there's Red. He felt like Elvis was a spoiled child, and he often felt like he should give his boss, Elvis, a spanking. Now, I'm not sure whether he said this after Elvis passed away or before, but it seems awful rough thing to say after he passed away, but I think he's trying to say that it wants us to walk away with an impression that Elvis had the innocence of a child. But what I really pull out of this is that Red considered Elvis to be spoiled, and that he didn't like putting up with it, and that he wanted to give him a spanking about it. You guys let me know what you think Red's saying. This is out of the middle of that magazine. Well, where is my other picture? I've got another lost picture here. Let me see if I can locate it. Nope. Nope. Well, on the thumbnail to the video, there was a picture of Red. And I'll have to show it to you in the next one, so I didn't get it lined up right either. But that picture is from this episode of Battlestar Galactica, The Lost Warrior. So in the following year, Red's working in Hollywood. And he works on this brand new $1 million per episode show in a single episode, but he's there. So if you're a Battlestar Galactica fan, Red West is in it. You can go see him. Red West says in this article that the people talk about this book I did. Now, this book just got published, like, couple weeks before Elvis passed away. So it feels like Red must be talking after that point. But he says, talk about this book I did like it was 100 years ago. Now, it's possible he's talking before the book's even published, which makes it even stranger. But he says the people talk about this book I did as if it's something way in the past. I think he says this because he's already spent all the money. Can't prove that. That's just my feeling about it. But he says the people talk about this book I did. They say I talked about Elvis's drugs and his guns and his sex life. Shoot, man, that's about a tenth of what it was all about. So Red's kind of indicating that whatever is in this book, which is mostly about drugs and guns and Elvis's sex life, that the book represents about a tenth of Elvis's real life. And that this other 9/10, well, Red and Sonny and Dave, they told this guy, Steve Dunleavy, all about it, but he didn't write it. Now, this particular article is being written by Steve Dunleavy, so none of that part comes out, if that's what Red meant. But 9/10, I think Red's telling us there was a whole lot more that he said about Elvis that's not in this book. Now, there's also a possibility Red never read the book, so he doesn't even know what's in it. And Elizabeth says that she thinks Red sounds better. I have always thought that Red and Sonny and Dave sounded very bitter at this period. And then they feel like they're dumped on for the rest of their lives and they're constantly defending themselves, but they never own up to the fact that they wrote this book in rage. And it really is immaterial what your purpose was with the book. It was written in rage. It was birthed in rage. All it could do is produce rage. So even the thoughts that there's 9/10 of the book where they're saying great things about Elvis exist out there somewhere, it's just not in print, that doesn't ring true to me. I'm sure there's 9/10 of a book that's out there, but I'm sure it's filled with bitterness and nasty statements as well. That I'm sure they're mixed in with good feelings and good memories. And Red West says, shoot, man, that's about a tenth of what it was all about. Didn't they see that me and my cousin Sonny loved the guy? Maybe loved him more than our own flesh and blood. People say we did it for the money. I promise you, and I have tape recorded conversations to prove it, that we were offered more money not to write the book than to write the book. So in this section of the statement, Red tells us that he's got these recorded conversations. Now, many of us have heard these recorded conversations. Supposedly, Elvis did not know that they were being recorded, which means that Red recorded them without Elvis's expressed knowledge. Now, was Elvis dumb? No. Elvis knew they were recording these. He knew this. It would have been something that Elvis would have thought about because he was into this kind of recording and spy technology. So I don't think Red could outsmart Elvis. You each have to make your own decision on that. I think Elvis knew that he was being taped, but Red never figures it out, and he's proud to tell us that he taped Elvis without his knowledge. And that he was offered in these tapes more money. I think he might also be referring to tapes with Elvis's attorney. That he was offered more money not to write the book than to write it. Now, by that point, I think they might have been too far along, but what's really important is they didn't agree with Elvis to say, yeah, let's stop the book. They pushed forward. We'll never know if Elvis could have got it stopped. If they had said, yeah, let's stop it, I'm sure he probably could have. But Red's making it clear he didn't want to stop writing it. He did not want to stop the publication of the book. And Red says, to me, writing that book was to give the boss a spanking. Well, Red told us that he wanted to give the boss a spanking, and now he is giving the boss a spanking. That lined up pretty well, huh? And that's right there in the article. To me, writing that book was to give the boss a spanking. Red says, Elvis was destroying himself. I knew it, he knew it, and it seemed that nothing was going to stop him. So now it's not clear to me if Red's saying the spanking would stop him, if Red knew the spanking wouldn't stop him, so he's spanking him just to spank him. He just wants to get in there and get a few licks in at him. It's not very clear. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think what is clear is that this spanking is a word that, or the hiding, that's another word. It's to take the hide off of a kid. It's a word for spanking. That these words of violent punishment are what Red wants to inflict on Elvis. This could also be called revenge. So I think Red's telling us he wanted to get some revenge. But that he knew nothing was going to stop Elvis from whatever it is he's saying out now. He's indicating drug use. He doesn't say that within this quote. But whatever it is Elvis is doing, it's not going to stop him. Red's just going to, he's going to hit him anyway. And Steve Dunleavy says, let me start over. Steve Dunleavy says, in January of this year, which is 1977, Red West told me. Now this means that Red and Steve, they met at some point because Steve mentions that they're in a car as they're having this discussion. Or he's saying they're in a car for a later discussion after Elvis has died. But this quote is from January. So they've either met in January or in January and late August, early September. There's an ongoing relationship between Red West and Steve Dunleavy that stretched past the book because we know they did it. I think it was October that they said when we looked at it before. We'll have to look that up for sure, but it's before the turn of the new year, 1977. And Steve Dunleavy says, Red West told me, if he keeps it up, I don't give him more than a year to live. And what makes Red's blood boil is that Presley's so-called closest friends knew as well as Red did that Elvis was committing suicide. So they bring in the self-harm thoughts. Steve starts this myth about this self-destruction. Now, we know that this is repeated by many, many people, including David Stanley. And even Priscilla, to some extent, hints at it a few times and then backs away when she gets a lot of backlash about it. But here we're seeing the birth of how this happens. We saw it in the days right after the death, but here we are a month out. It's beginning to solidify. And Red West says, if Elvis had stayed a truck driver, he'd be alive today. Elvis wouldn't have got into that crazy life of Hollywood, and neither would I. And we'd be somewhere in Memphis making fools of ourselves and singing and playing the guitar and loving each other right now. But how many people in the world can resist all that crap? We're all humans. Elvis was better than most, but he was human. And perhaps the most human thing about Elvis was that more than anyone I ever knew, Elvis wanted to be loved. So Red's got a whole life built for himself out in Hollywood. He's calling it a crazy life. And that he wouldn't be out there if it wasn't for Elvis. Almost like he's blaming Elvis for his life in Hollywood. Hi, Tarzan. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And he says if Elvis had just stayed a truck driver, they wouldn't have all these problems. Well, if Elvis had stayed a truck driver, I doubt Red and Elvis would have ever reconnected. Because Red was a driver for Elvis. That's how this got started. Sometimes they play some football together, some touch football, but how long would that have lasted? As they each moved into their adulthood and their adult responsibilities. Red says they'd still be loving each other right now. Red's trying to tell us that he did love Elvis at some point. Maybe he doesn't anymore. Or that Elvis loved him. And maybe that's gone because Elvis is dead. And then he says somebody caved because who could resist all that crap? We're all humans. Well, is he talking about Elvis or is he talking about Red? Is he the one that couldn't resist crap and he's trying to tell us that he's a human? He had to take money for this book. He had to. How could he resist that crap? But he does say that Elvis wanted love. And then this must have happened the majority of the interview after Elvis passed away, because it ends with Red saying, man, Elvis will be up there organizing people into a rhythm section, a brass section. He'll be laying down the law. It's like it should be because he's the boss. So it sounds like Red saying Elvis is dead. If he said that before Elvis had passed away, I don't know. That's even weirder. But that does bring us to the end of this episode and this article. But when we return, we're going to get those missed pictures I promised you. Plus, we're going to get to see not this particular article. It's called They Fried in the Sun as Elvis Tried to Move a Cloud. So I did kind of tell this story in the spiritual series the other day. This is Red and Sonny telling the story out of their book. We're not going to look at it right now or anytime soon. And if we do look at it, we're going to pull in more material than just this Elvis What Happened. But we got this really interesting page coming up. We're going to hear from Nurse Cock. How many of you thought Nurse Cock, if you know her, would have been in the Star magazine? This is before she published her book. We're going to see that Priscilla's lawyer says Elvis and Priscilla are still legally married at the time he died. And that's how she's his widow. Did you guys know that? Did you know that they were still legally married according to her? Well, these are public statements her lawyer's making. It's not, the Star's not making this up. Her lawyer made statements that they're still legally married. This is in the news at that time. Now, we've also been talking about this engagement ring, and you can see an article that says he bought a $35,000 ring at 12:30 a.m. Well, what ring do you think they're talking about? It's that engagement ring. But down at the bottom, it says the night that Lisa Marie will never forget, and we're going to get to hear a story about Liberty Land. And we're going to try to figure out who that girl is that's with Lisa Marie, because the article says it's Priscilla Presley. But I think we can look at her even in this little small picture and see that is not Priscilla Presley. And Cali Girl says, so they never divorced? Well, we're going to hear the legal explanation in the next episode, straight from Priscilla's lawyer. So again, I'm not pulling anything from somebody who doesn't like Priscilla. This is what her lawyer says. But we're going to get to that in the next episode. And until then, I'm going to leave you guys with a song. And it's going to be kind of the themed song for the series. It's Heartache and Frustration. And until I see you all again, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciated all the conversation that you had in the chat, even though I couldn't keep up with it all. Pat wants to remind me that this is bull that Priscilla's lawyer would say this, because we all saw them come from the courthouse. He has an explanation for that, Pat. He has an explanation. And we were just looking at the picture in that particular article, too, of them coming out. But until then, we're going to go out on this song, Heartache and Frustration, and you all keep on taking care of business.
You walk through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, old flames you can see. He called her wife, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone. While the world kept intruding, love turned to stone. The eyes met again, the fire's still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along, but the door closed behind her. The moment couldn't stay. She felt that he faded as he walked away. On the speedway set, she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she kept. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one single, lost in the rhyme. If love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.